I think she's having trouble getting Brandon's microphone going.
Yeah, we need to read it.
Hello? Oh, can you hear me? You're not gonna say anything, Deborah?
Do you want me to say something first?
Oh, no, that's okay. I was gonna do this at the reception, but we thought that we had sort of a quorum here, we do it now, and then we could all go to the reception and just have a drink and enjoy ourselves. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming today. I'm Jerry's daughter, Robin, and we are here to celebrate the life of a remarkable man, my father, Dr. Gerald Roberts, who was known as Jerry to all of his friends and family. He had what he fully realized was an amazing life for a poor boy from Clarksburg, West Virginia, who was born just before the start of the Great Depression. He went further than he could have ever imagined back then, and he saw many distant shores during his lifetime. He leaves behind a large, loving family and many, many loyal and wonderful friends. My dad actually was very blessed to have friends from each stage of his life, and he now goes to join a great many of them who are no longer here with us. He grew up in a very close-knit family with his two brothers, Gene and Clifford, in Clarksburg, West Virginia. He grew up feasting on his mother's homemade Italian specialties, such as spaghetti and meatballs, fruit tarts, fried dough, and the homemade bread that she made each and every week. He was an altar boy and served at the Mass, which at that time was said in Latin, so he has had a love of the Latin Mass his whole life. In fact, tomorrow we are going to be celebrating a Latin Mass in his honor. He excelled in school, and he was particularly gifted in science and math. In high school, he also played football, and he was a running back. And he had a great love of football his whole life. And we all grew up watching football with my dad. Despite being relatively small, during high school he was under 140 pounds. He was really, really fast, so he was a fairly good running back. But he couldn't play at the college level given his size. He told us about this one time that in high school when he got the ball on the 10-yard line, of the opponent's 10-yard line, and one of the guys on the other team picked him up, ball and all, took him across their goal line for 2 points. That was probably the worst part of his football career. He was a long-suffering Redskins fan, as Dan knows, and to be fair, the Redskins were actually very good at one point back in the 1960s and 70s. So and he was a season ticket holder, so we all grew up either going to the games or sitting at home watching the away games with my dad. Also, in high school and after graduation, he worked many, many hours in his dad's Exxon filling station, which back then the company was called Esso. This taught him the value of working hard, and he continued to be an extremely hard worker his entire life. He always told us that you really don't get something for nothing in this life. He told us, and all 5 children have gone on to be successful professionals thanks to Dad instilling this work ethic in us, and also thanks to him paying for over 30 years tuition for undergraduate and graduate schools. You see how many, there were quite a few of us. We're very thankful for that. And this being Martin Luther King Day, I thought I would mention, I think it's especially appropriate to mention that my dad experienced discrimination during his childhood because he was Italian. He was of Italian heritage. He would reminisce about being called derogatory names by others, and he would tell us that during the hot, hot summers in West Virginia, he was not allowed to go in the lake because they did not allow Italians to go in, and it was a public lake. But some good came out of even this. He always rooted for the underdog, and he sympathized with those that were not treated fairly by our society. He judged people not by their actions, and not by the color of their skin, at a time when this was really not the norm. After high school, he enlisted in the Army in early 1946, shortly after his 18th birthday. I once asked him, "Aren't you glad that you turned 18 right after the war ended in 1945, so you weren't sent to Japan or Europe?" And he responded, "No, I've always been a bit sad and regretful that I did not get to go over there and help fight for our country." My dad was one of the most patriotic people you could have ever met in your life. He went on to serve as a medical technician in the Army, earning the rank of sergeant. After he got out of the Army, he used the GI Bill to attend Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Then he was accepted to dental school at Northwestern in Chicago, where he graduated in 1953. Again, like in high school, he became lifelong friends with several of his classmates. In fact, our family would go on vacations annually with the family of his dental school roommate, Dr. Bruce Shaw from Akron, Ohio. And throughout their lives, the two men always would refer to each other as roomie rather than by their first names. After he finished dental school, he moved to Northern Virginia, where he started a dental practice in Vienna, Virginia. An interesting fact is that he was the very first dentist in Vienna, Virginia, and he was very much in demand as DC, the suburbs were exploding back in the 1950s. By the time he retired, over 35 years later, there were 56 dentists just in the Vienna-Tysons area. So that kind of shows you how much the area really grew up during the time he was practicing. He was, by all accounts, an excellent dentist. You can see, partly because he was a perfectionist. In fact, the governor of Virginia and his wife, and I'm not going to drop their names, but she happened to be a president's daughter, would travel 2 hours from Richmond, Virginia, just to go see the good Dr. Roberts and get their teeth done by him rather than someone else. And my husband has some other stories about them and them coming to visit the dental practice, which he can tell you later. We were infamous in our subdivision for giving out dental kits at Halloween, complete with toothpaste, toothbrush, and disclosing tablets. Kids from all over this very large neighborhood would be instructed by their parents, whatever you do, make sure you go by the Roberts house and get your new toothbrush. And I kept thinking, is that the only time their parents ever buy them to get them a toothbrush? By coming to their house? At the time, I was a little bit embarrassed that we didn't give out candy like the rest of our neighbors. But in retrospect, I can see how progressive and generous giving out these packages were. Once he landed in Northern Virginia after dental school, he got reacquainted with a lovely nurse from Chicago whom he had dated while he was back in dental school. As I recall, I think she might have tracked him down. In 1957, he married his wonderful life partner, our mom, Frankie. They remained happily married these past 62 years. They went on to raise 5 children, Deborah, JD, Scott, me, and Donna. My best childhood memories of my dad involve our frequent trips to the beaches in Delaware, Maryland, and South Carolina. That was where my dad was probably the most relaxed. He would wake up early to make pancakes for the entire gang, or he'd run out to Krispy Kreme and bring us back hot, fresh donuts. If anyone was awake early, he would take them out to the water and we'd all go for an early morning ocean swim. In addition to his busy dental practice, my dad had a passion for golf, as many of you know. He played every chance he got and all over the United States. During his lifetime, he was lucky and skilled enough to have 3 hole-in-ones. Don and I weren't sure if it was holes in one or hole-in-ones. So I think it's hole-in-ones. When he was in his 40s, he fulfilled a lifetime dream of becoming a pilot. I remember the thrill of going up with him in these small Cessnas and Pipers and flying over our neighborhood. And then some of the rest of the family would be in the yard. He'd tip the wing over our house. Although I probably should have been a little more scared than I was, I always trusted Dad that he knew what he was doing. Another little known fact is that my dad had a really creative side. He would often make beautiful gold jewelry for his wife and daughters. And in fact, tomorrow my mom's going to be wearing one of the creations that he made for her. After he retired in his 60s, he and Mom moved to an island off the coast of Savannah, Georgia. There, they engaged in many charitable activities, they hosted visits from family and friends, and they traveled the world. They subsequently moved to Dade City in their 70s to start a brand new adventure. Anyone who knew my dad knew that he was first and foremost a man of integrity, a man who lived his values. You may not have always agreed with his worldview, but you had to admire his steadfast upholding of his convictions. He really walked the walk with respect to his beliefs. He would frequently say, "What's right is right," and he always tried to do what he believed was the right thing. He could be tough, and he was a very strict father, but his love never wavered. He loved his wife and family, he loved all of his friends, he loved his country, and he loved God. Throughout his long life, he repeatedly told us never to be a quitter, and he lived that adage, especially during the last several difficult years of his life. He accepted his fate with grace and dignity. We are so thankful that he is now at peace, but he is not truly gone. He will always live in our hearts and our minds, and he will continue to provide his family the moral compass for our lives. Thank you so much for coming.